Eighth graders, how are you doing? This is an exciting part for me. We are going to finish up our book, The Absent Author. Today, I'm going to get to chapter 10, which is the very, very end of this book. So, as you are listening, I'm sure you're just going to be at the edge of your seats. I know I am. This is my favorite part. Okay, here we go. Chapter 10. Ruth Rose, what are you talking about? Josh said. Dink didn't know what to think, except that he was getting a headache. What makes you think I'm Wallace Wallace? Mavis asked. Ruth Rose walked over to Mavis. May I borrow your scarf? She said. Ruth Rose held up the scarf so everyone could see it. When I first saw this scarf, I saw these little black letters were M's, she said. M's for Mavis. She looked at Mavis Greene. But they're not M's, are they? She turned the scarf completely upside down. What do they look like now? Dink stepped closer. They're little W's now. Right. W for Wallace Wallace. Ruth Rose pointed at the man. You just said that you live in a little cottage, but Wallace Wallace lives in a big castle in Maine. It says so on the cover of The Silent Swamp. Ruth Rose pointed at Mavis's book bag. Seeing your bag again made me remember something I thought of today. Josh read that your castle was called Moose Manor. There's a picture of a moose on the side of your bag. Ruth Rose handed the scarf back to Mavis. And we read that Wallace Wallace's favorite color is green. You like green ice cream, and you chose Mavis Greene for your fake name. Everyone was staring at Ruth Rose, except for the man that they had untied. He started laughing. Cat's out of the bag now, sis, he said. Then Mavis laughed and gave Ruth Rose a hug. Yes, Ruth Rose, Mavis said. I really am Wallace Wallace. She put her hand on the man's shoulder. And this is my brother, Walker Wallace. We've been planning on my kidnapping for weeks. Dink stared at Mavis, or whoever she was. You mean Wallace Wallace is a woman? He said. Yes, Dink, I am a woman, and I'm definitely Wallace Wallace. She winked at him. Honest. Mavis, the real Wallace Wallace, sat on the bed. She took off her glasses and pulled the barrettes out of her hair. She shook her hair a little bit until it puffed out into a mass of wild curls. Thank goodness I can be myself now, she said. All day I had to act like a timid Mavis Greene. I can't wait to get out of this fuddy-duddy dress and into my jeans again. She kicked off her shoes and wiggled her toes in the air. Boy, does that feel good. Dink blinked and shook his head. Mavis Greene was really Wallace Wallace? He couldn't believe it. But why did you pretend to be kidnapped? He asked. The real Wallace Wallace grinned at the kids' surprised faces. I owe you an explanation, she said. My new book is about a children's mystery writer who gets kidnapped. In my book, some children rescue the writer. I wanted to find out how a real kid might solve the mystery, she explained. She smiled at Dink. Then your letter came, inviting me to Green Lawn. That's what gave me the idea to fake my own kidnapping. I'd become Mavis Greene and watch what happened. Oh, yeah, Dink said. In your letter, you said that you were doing some research in Connecticut. She nodded. Yes, and I mentioned the word kidnap in the letter to get you thinking on those lines. She smiled at all three kids. I thought I'd have to give you more clues, but you solved the mystery all by yourself. Here are the pictures. Take a look at Wallace Wallace. Did you ever expect that? Dink laughed. You recognized me at the bookstore for my picture, he said, and you didn't send me a picture so I wouldn't recognize you. Then my nutty sister dragged me into her plan, Walker Wallace said. I should be home checking on my lobster pots. While you were eating lunch, Walker and I ate ours up here, Wallace said. Then, just before 2 o'clock, I tied him in a chair and ran downstairs to meet you out front as Mavis. Wallace Wallace threw back her head and laughed. Do you remember downstairs when Dink said there was something fishy on the third floor? She got up and stood next to her brother. Well, I'm always teasing Walker about something smelling fishy from handling his lobster bait. So when you said something was fishy in the hotel, I had to pretend to cough so you wouldn't know that I was really laughing. Boy, did you have us fooled, Dink said. Wallace grinned. Mr. Paskey was in on it. I had to tell him the truth. As you saw this morning at the book nook, my little scheme made him very nervous. Remember when he was nervous all the time? I promised I'd come back and do a real book signing soon, but I'll be in disguise, so be prepared for anything. Dink shook his head. I was so disappointed because I couldn't meet my favorite author this morning, he said, and I've been with you all day and I didn't even know it. She looked at Dink. I'm so sorry I tricked you. Will you forgive me? Dink blushed. Sure. I have a question, Josh said. Were you really where did you really sleep last night? Right here in room 302. A few weeks ago, I telephoned to reserve 2 rooms next to each other. Last night, I checked into room 303 as Wallace the man. Up in room 303, I took off the hat and coat and sunglasses. Then I sneaked back down to the lobby wearing a blonde wig. I checked in again, this time into room 302. Did you smudge the signature? Ruth Rose asked. Oh, you noticed that, Wallace said. I'm so used to signing my real name in books, I started to write Wallace, so I accidentally smudged it. I have a question, Miss Wallace. What should we call you? Dink asked. My friends call me Wallace, she said. Well, the taxi driver told us you were smiling in the taxi. What were you smiling about? Wallace was smiling now. Oh, about lots of things. First, I was wearing a man's disguise, and that made me feel pretty silly. And I knew I was going to meet you, one of my biggest fans, and I was happy because I knew whatever happened, the next day would be fun. I sure had fun, Josh said, grinning. Poor Mr. Paskey, having to lie at everyone with a straight face. Boy, did I have a hard time pretending to be Mavis all day, Wallace said, but my plan worked. I met 3 brilliant detectives. You helped me to see how real kids would investigate a kidnapping. Now I can go back to Maine and finish my book. How come your book jackets never say that you're a woman? Ruth Rose asked. Wallace smiled. Because of my name. Most people assume that I'm a man, she explained. I let them think that so I can do my research easier. I've learned that when people clam up when they know I'm Wallace. So out in public, I pretend I'm Mavis Greene, just a regular person, not a mystery writer. I get it, Dink said. You don't have your picture in your book so people can't recognize you. Right, and I hope you'll keep my secret. We will, right guys? Ruth Rose said. Thank you. Any more questions? Wallace asked. Yeah, Walker said, giving his sister a look. When do we leave? I've got lobsters waiting for me. I have a question too, Dink said. Will you send me your picture now? Yes, but I'll do better than that, Wallace said. I'll dedicate my next book to my new 3 friends. Can you imagine having a book dedicated for you? Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose did a triple high five. Excuse me, Mr. Linkletter said from the door where he had been standing. They all looked at him. It's nearly checkout time. Everyone laughed. Mr. Linkletter smiled, but just a little. The end. I can't believe it's over. Wallace, a woman. The M's on the scarf were really W's. That makes me question everything. Are M&M's not really M&M's? Are they W and W's? I don't know. I'm going to have to look at them a little closer next time. Okay, so here we are. The end of our book. The end of The Absent Author. You have become great mystery readers. So here's what you're going to do today. Now, I know that we have been working the whole entire time. You've kind of grown a little bit as mystery writers. You've gotten better. Hopefully, as you are watching this, you are starting to think of the things that actually happened in the book. I'm starting to think of, now I remember that the green that Mavis Greene was wearing, her last name, that had something to do. The moose on the top of on the tote bag. It just makes me just wonder and wonder and wonder. What else? What are the other clues I missed? So what I want you to do is I want you to get out your booklet and I want you to open to session 9. What I want you to focus on is this chart right over here. I know you talked about this chart with Mrs. Sardina the last time, but focus on this chart for me. So now, as you are probably starting your new book, maybe you're at the beginning of your new book, or maybe you're at the end of your new book, or maybe you're in the middle of your new book. Anyway, what I want you to do is I want you to focus on these parts. So if you're at the beginning of this book, what I want you to do is I want you to look at some of these sentence starters. And this is what I want you to focus on your Google Doc today. So remember to put today's date and then use these sentence starters to kind of help you start thinking about what you are reading, things that you're noticing. If you're in the middle of your book, I want you to focus on this middle section. So I want you to focus on some of these sentence starters. You don't have to do all of them, but just focus on a couple and write about those. If you're towards the end of your book, or maybe your first book, or maybe you're towards the end of your second book, I want you to focus on these questions. And this is what I want you to write about in your Google Docs. Again, you don't have to write about every single one in each section. Okay? You are becoming great mystery readers, and hopefully, as you are reading more and more mystery books, you're going to start thinking a little bit sooner and wondering, is this a clue that's going to help me solve my mystery? So, I can't believe this book is over. What a great book. I think I might read it again and start to pay attention to some of those clues. I wonder what else I missed. So, enjoy your mystery books. Keep reading, keep thinking, keep writing down. I know some of you have been writing in your Google Doc that you've been using Post-it notes to write down clues, writing down people, your characters that you're noticing. So I want you to keep doing that. So what you can do now is use this information to make deeper predictions, to make deeper clues to what you are wondering about. So happy reading, mystery writers and readers, and until next time.